Okay. So you guys have probably talked about simple interest in the past. The formula for simple interest is I equals PRT. Y'all remember that formula? Don't write this down, Sierra. Do y'all remember that, seeing that sometime? Okay, well, that's simple interest. So let me give you an example. Let's say I borrow $50 from Miss Marshall, and I borrow money from her all the time. So she's tired of it, and she says, okay, she said, if you don't pay me back by the end of the week, I'm going to start charging you interest. I'm going to charge you 10% every week that you don't pay me back. So 10%. So every week, I'm going to owe her 10% of that $50. So 10% of that $50 is $5. So my interest that I pay is going to be $5 per week that I don't pay it back. So at the end of the first week, instead of $50, I'm going to owe her $55. At the end of the next week, I'm going to owe her $60. Then I'm going to owe her $65. Okay? So that's simple interest, where you calculate the interest at the very beginning, and that's the interest that you pay each time. Compound interest means that it's going to be recalculated each time on the new total. So let's say she gets even smarter and says it's going to be, I'm going to compound it. So each week, okay, so it's going to be 10%. So 10% of 50 is 5. So after the first week, I'm going to owe her $55. Okay? But then it's going to be compounded. So instead of it just adding $5 each time, it's going to recalculate the interest on $55. 55 times 0.10 is $5.50. So instead of me owing her $60, I'm going to owe her $60.50, a little bit more. And then the next week, it's going to recalculate. So I'm going to multiply by 0.10 again, and that's going to be $6.05. Instead of $5, now I owe her $6.05, which makes $66.55. So you can see that compounding it, it refigures it on the new total. It doesn't just calculate the interest on the beginning, it calculates it multiple times. And remember, when you multiply repeatedly, I'm multiplying by 10% every time, that's exponential. That's why it's an exponential function. So when we're talking about compound interest, this is really, really, if you look at our old formula, it had this right here. Okay, it was A equals P times 1 plus R to the T. That was our old growth formula, because it was getting bigger a little bit every time. But now we're going to compound it. What would be nice for your bank is if they compounded, like if they paid 10%, if they paid 10% every time. But the bank doesn't do that. The bank, if the annual interest rate, this right here, that number right there, is the annual rate divided by the number of times it's compounded. So if you have a 12% interest rate, if they compound it every month, that means they're really only going to compound 1% every month. It's going to be a total of 12% over the year. Okay. The A stands for the final dollar amount. The P stands for the principal, which is the starting amount. The R is the interest rate. And remember, with the interest rate, it's going to be a percent that you have to change to a decimal. That means move the decimal Always 2 places to the left. T is the time in years. With some growth formulas, like if they're calculating it over days, T is in days. But when it's talking about interest, it's always in years. The N is the number of times it's compounded. And over here, you might want to write that compounded means it's refigured. Now, most of the time, it's not going to say compounded 6 times or compounded 4 times. It's going to give you some words, words that you have to distinguish. So if it says compounded monthly, what does monthly mean? If something's done monthly, what does that mean? By the month, so every month. So if it's compounded monthly for a year, that means it's compounded every month for a year. How many times in that year is it going to be compounded? 12. So that means if it's monthly, N is 12. What if it said it's compounded weekly? That means every week. So how many times in a year is it going to be? Yeah, that's 7 days in a week. How many weeks are in a year? Hint, it's 52. Okay. What about if it said semi-annually? What do you think if something happens semi-annually, how many do you think it happens? A semicircle is what? Half a circle. So semi-annually would be half a year. So how many times would it happen if it's compounded every half a year?
Once every 6 months.
Once every 6 months, but how many times is that in a year? Twice, right. So semi-annually, N would be 2. What if it says it's going to compound it daily? How many days are in a year? Yep. So N would be 365. Now, there's one more. If it says that it's compounded quarterly. If I split something into quarters, how many quarters do I have? If I have $1 and I split it up into quarters, how many quarters do I have? 4. So if it says quarterly, then N equals 4. So what monthly means is they're going to recalculate the interest 12 times in a year. Okay? If they calculate it, if they compound it weekly, they're going to recalculate it every day. So it'll be every week, 52 times. Semi-annually, it'll be done twice. Daily would be done 365 times. And quarterly would be done 4 times. What if they calculated it monthly for 2 years? How many total times would it be done? If it was monthly, 24, right? Because 12 the first year and 12 the second year makes 24. Okay, so that's how the formula is going to work. It's the same as the growth formula, only we've got to do some work with that compounding. Now, you'll know the difference between compounding and any other type of problem, because if they want you to compound it, they have to say how many times to compound it. They can't say, find out how much compounded. You know, how much money this is compounded at 4% a year. They have to tell you, well, how many times are they going to compound it? How many times are they going to recalculate it? So let's look at this example. It says, when Bailey was born, her grandparents invested $1,000 in an account that earned 7% Okay, that 7% is for a whole year. Compounded quarterly. So, and it says, how much money will Bailey have when she turns 18? So let's write down everything we know. We don't know A. We know P. P is the starting amount. How much does she start off with in the account? $1,000. We know the interest rate. How much percent is she going to earn each year? 7%. Now remember, when you have a percent, you have to move the decimal 2 places to the left. So when we put that into the formula, it's going to be 0.07. Do we know how many times each year it's going to be recalculated? 4 times. Where'd you get that from? Quarterly. Since it says quarterly right there, N is going to be 4. And then we need to know how many years it's going to be calculated. Do we know how many years to calculate it? It's going to be done 4 times a year for how many years? Look at the question. So they put the $1,000 in when she was born. How many years is it going to be? 18. It's going to be compounded 18 years. Okay. So we had 5 variables up here, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We wouldn't be able to figure this out if we didn't have 4 of those, and we do. We have 4. So if they didn't tell us how many years, we wouldn't be able to calculate it. If they didn't tell us how many times a year to figure it, we wouldn't be able to get an answer. If they didn't tell us what they started with, we wouldn't be able to get an answer. They have to give us 4 pieces of information to find the 5th. They always have to do that, okay? So let's write our formula. A equals P times 1 plus R divided by N to the NT. Now, if it was compounded annually, it'd be compounding 1 time, and that's the simple growth formula, because R divided by 1 is just R, and N times T is just T. So let's plug in all the numbers that we know. I'm going to change P to 1,000. I'm going to change R to 0.07, and N is going to be 4. And then up here, NT, that means I'm going to take the N, 4, and multiply it by how many years, which is 18. So let me walk through each piece of information in that formula. So this right here, she started, or they put in $1,000 when she was born. It's growth, so that's why it's this 1 plus. And then this right here, the banks are not going to give her 7% every 4 months. They're going to take that 7% that's for the whole year, divide it by 4, and they're going to give her 1/4 of that 7% every month. So that's why it's 0.07 divided by 4. And then it compounds 4 times per year, but she's doing for 18 years. So that number there is the total number of compounded times, total number of times it's calculated for that 18 years. Now, what I want to talk to you about is how to enter this into the calculator. 4 times 18 is 72. Okay, so a total of 72 times. Now, when you enter this on the calculator, let me show you how you have to enter it. You could do the 0.07 divided by 4, and then you'd have to round it, maybe. But you don't want to round inside a formula, because you'll probably have to round at the end too. And if you round and then round, you're farther away from the dollar amount. So what you need to do is make sure when you enter on your calculator, put parentheses around the fraction, okay? So when you enter it, you'll do 1,000, open parentheses, 1 plus, open parentheses, 0.07 divided by 4, close, close, raised to the 72. So you guys go ahead and grab a calculator and let's work through it. Grab me one too. So, okay. Okay, so 1,000. So type 1,000, then open parentheses, then do 1 plus, and then open parentheses again, 0.07 divided by 4, then close the parentheses, and then you have to close the parentheses again, because that first parentheses closes around the fraction, and then the second one closes around the 1 plus, and then you hit the raise to the 72. And you should have gotten 3487.209897. Is that what y'all got? Did you get that? Did you get that? Okay. So that's a decimal there. It's money. So we have to round to the nearest hundredth. That's the second decimal. To round to the hundredth, we have to look to the next number to the right. Since that's a 9, that means when she turned 18, she had $3,487.21 in that account. Okay. Any questions? Okay. It's pretty much just plugging in